Hello.
Hi, Gungling.
Good to hear you, Gongling.
Yeah, okay, it's the same for me. And it was automatically muted. And it was automatically muted.
Gentlemen, you are transmitting live over the internet. Please mute your mics.
Okay.
Hello and good afternoon from the International Space University in Strasbourg, France. And welcome to the final team project presentations for our MSc in Space Studies class of 2020. I'm Chris Welch, the MSS Program Director. Today is the 58th day of remote operation of the MSS, and like many of you watching, all of us at ISU have had to learn new ways of collaborative working to enable us to continue the MSS program and to reach this culmination. I'd very much like to thank all involved, the students, staff and faculty, for their positive attitude, their focus and their hard work. Some of you watching will know ISU very well, others not so much. So I'd like to emphasize what we call the 3 I's that are at the heart of the ISU community and its programs. The 3 I's stand for international, interdisciplinary and intercultural. And ISU develops the future workforce by providing interdisciplinary programs to students and space professionals in an international intercultural environment. But what does that mean here today? It means that both the team projects and the students who have worked on them and who are presenting them today are truly interdisciplinary. Scientists, lawyers, engineers, computer programmers, to name only a few. ISU is not an engineering school or a business school or a law school. It is the Space School. This afternoon, we have 2 team projects being presented for the first time completely online and with all the participants remote from each other. We encourage our teams to be creative in their presentations, so I look forward to seeing what they've achieved and learning from it as well. The format for each project presentation will be a 1-hour presentation followed by a 30-minute Q&A session, which I'm afraid will only be for the ISU faculty as the professors are grading the teams today as well. After the first presentation and Q&A, there'll be a short break, and then we will start with the second presentation. The MSS20 team projects are ChipSats, New Opportunities, and Extraterrestrial Intelligence, the Search, the Science, and the Significance. It's now my very great pleasure to hand over to Team Project ChipSat.
Thank you, Chris, for the warm welcome. Can you see my screen?
We can.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much again, Chris, for the introduction, and a very warm welcome to everyone. To the ISU President, Juan Del Mao, our esteemed ISU faculty, my fellow colleagues at Team ChipSat, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure today to talk with you about Team Project ChipSat. I'm joined here on this virtual stage by my colleagues and good friends, Natalia Lemarquis from Poland and Uri Griezmann-Ran from Israel. My name is Marco Marsh and I'm from the UK. Let's get started. So, meet the team. We are a very multinational team comprised of 18 nationalities coming from all corners of the globe, 5 continents. This photo here on the right shows one of our cherished team photos at the end of the literature review back in December. And these are fun memories to look on, and we'll look back on some more fun memories a little later. Today's outline of the presentation goes as follows. We're going to walk you through the mission statement of this team project, followed by a sequence of the objectives that drove us forward. We're going to run through a bit of background on ChipSats, touching on whether it's a potential revolution or not. We're going to give you a crash course in the engineering aspects of the ChipSat. Before Natalia will walk you through the ISU ChipSat roadmap. Uri will then take over and talk to you about the mission selection for space weather monitoring, the Lunar Communication Relay. And from there, he will hand it over back to me to wrap up with a SWOT analysis, a series of challenges, a sequence of recommendations that we put forward, and to wrap up with a set of conclusions. So, our mission statement. We came up with this statement back in December last year, and the idea behind it was to come up with something that both captures the essence of the TP with ChipSats, but to also talk about what we value and what we cherish and the bonds that we wish to foster over the course of the 7 to 8 months that we are together doing this project. And it reads as follows: to envision innovative chipset applications, which will inspire the space community by analyzing technology and potential markets and establishing a roadmap for the International Space University to launch their own chipsets within 3 to 5 years. Our path will encourage a sustainable relationship between the cosmos and humanity, while promoting respect, professionalism, and team bonding. Team ChipSat, MSS 2020. These are the 5 project objectives, pillars, if you will. Objective 1 was to perform a wide scope market review, followed by an engineering analysis and discuss the associated technology readiness levels of ChipSat subsystems. The third objective was to outline ISU's 5-year roadmap to launch an in-house ChipSat before selecting and designing 2 new ChipSat missions. And our final one was to review challenges and put forward recommendations, which was informed by those challenges. ChipSats. The mantra goes faster, better, cheaper. And over time, particularly in recent decades, satellite designs have seen a progressive downscaling in both mass and cost. And this has led to an intriguing new generation of satellites called ChipSats. We identify ChipSats as a credit card-sized, inexpensive, and sub 10-gram satellite platform. You can see the figure on the right. It's a visual representation of this downscaling from traditional satellite platforms to CubeSats, and now where we are, ChipSats. We believe that ChipSats are envisioned for large constellation architectures, and we'll touch on some of those architectures a little later when we discuss the missions that we outlined and selected. To give you an engineering overview of the ChipSat subsystems, many of the subsystems are similar to traditional satellite designs. Structurally speaking, it's made up of a printed circuit board, a PCB. With respect to onboard data handling, the brain, if you will, of the platform, it is a microcontroller that governs and dictates functionality of the chipset. For communications, the core item there is the omnidirectional antenna. We've touched on 2 aspects of power: the photovoltaic cell, which is for power generation, and power storage, which we've identified as to be developed. And this informs our recommendations later in the presentation. Concerning thermal control, at the moment, only passive means are available to regulate temperature on the platform. And concerning attitude control and determination systems, active systems remain premature and undeveloped, and we also touch on this a little later. The table you see here is an overview of the commercially available components that can be used to assemble a generic ChipSat design. From the top, we touched on the microcontroller, again, the brain of the ChipSat. We, after a comprehensive review by our engineers, identified it as a high TRL component, ranking 9. Concerning the attitude control and determination system, we've highlighted 2 components here. We know that the magnetometer is of interest to the ChipSat design. However, it would depend on the application of the ChipSat, which would dictate whether we use a magnetometer or not. The 9-axis inertial magnetic unit is another one we touched on, and it's of a higher TRL and may be of interest to the ChipSat design as it has gyroscopic properties. Structurally speaking, we mentioned the PCB as being the core component for that. We should not forget that we would have to integrate a thermal protection and radiation protection system on top of it, the Captain coating, and that would have to be dimensioned according to the PCB accordingly. Concerning communications, we know that with the microcontroller design that we've selected, Texas Instruments, which is the manufacturer of the component that we have reviewed, has an integrated chip where there is a transceiver and a microcontroller integrated together. And we talked about the omnidirectional antenna earlier, and we found that to have a high TRL rating as well, based on previous ChipSat missions that have launched. Concerning power, we're going to talk about the power generation aspect of the design. The photovoltaic cell here is marked with two different architectures, A1 and A2. A1 concerns the deployment of a ChipSat with attitude control. By having gyroscopic management of properties on board, it enables sun-facing of the platform to generate power. And the more sun you get, the more power you get, and the more power you get, the expansion of functionality you have for the ChipSat platform. A2 concerns the figures for a randomized orientation deployment of ChipSats. If there is no attitude control in place on the platform, we will assume that there will be intermittent intervals between when ChipSats will receive power. And the figure here demonstrates the hard limit of how much power we can generate with that architecture. And of course, we should not forget that the platform itself will have other electronic components embedded inside, including resistors, capacitors. And we've dimensioned that accordingly in this summary. And at this point, it is my great pleasure to hand over presenting duties to my colleague, Natalia. She will walk you through the Icy Roadmap.
Thank you, Marco, for describing the details of ChipSat design and its challenges. And I'll now take over to describe our plan and our proposal of how ISU can use ChipSats to benefit. My name is Natalia Demarquis, and I led the ISU Roadmap team. This team was comprised of people of great creativity and great minds. So before laying a robust plan, I would like to draw your attention to the capabilities of ChipSats, but this time from the perspective of all ISU disciplines, not only engineering. Our team took a challenge to answer the most important question: how and why would ISU be interested at all in ChipSats? Well, to an outsider, the ChipSat might seem like a simple piece of wired plastic, but to us, the answer is simple. Every ChipSat integrates all ISU free I values. You may think that this statement is too bold. Well, try to think of ChipSat not as a technology, but rather as a mean of communication combined with ultra low price. Then you will understand that ChipSat is in fact an enabler. This is the logic behind the graphic in the center, and it's also visible in our poster. So ChipSat enables reaching out to people in remote regions. It enables partnerships and cooperations between institutions, between companies, and also knowledge exchange. It enables sending scientific missions to low Earth orbit and other places at a higher rate, especially for education. And also it gives the students hands-on experience. Following this logic, we consulted Juan de Dalmau, who is the president of ISU, about the strategic objectives that university has. The main goals we are presenting at this slide, amongst them there are objectives to ensure the high rate of payloads for ISU laboratory. It's to ensure the growth of the university, bring a high level quality education, and be a leader in delivering quality space education across the world, especially reaching out to the underrepresented regions. We then created the core elements of the roadmap plan, and we designed 3 work streams. First one is ISU ChipSat program, which develops the capability of designing, building, and sending ISU own ChipSats to low Earth orbit. We also worked on the regulatory framework that has to be obeyed in order to send ChipSats. And we are proposing the outreach campaign to promote ISU across the globe. This roadmap was designed in 3 work streams running in parallel, so there's no overlap between the skill set. And now I'll move on to describing each of those work streams one by one. So first work stream is to propose ISU to send and build own ChipSats to low Earth orbit within next 5 years. And why do we call it the ChipSat program? Because it consists of 2 elements. It's building own ChipSat, and it's also building own laboratory to assemble and test ChipSats. Developing ChipSat will serve to increase the high rate of ChipSat laboratory and to send scientific payloads. It will also define a list of individual projects for ISU students and will build the knowledge base and staff training. Whereas the developing own laboratory will give the students and staff the opportunity to work hands-on in a simulated satellite building environment and learn about the assembly and testing, and predominantly to test on ChipSats. Here you can see the proposed step-by-step process. The step 1 is the detailed design of the mission. Step 2 is to acquire funding for the laboratory. Step 3 is a detailed engineering design of release mechanism. Step 4 is assembly and integration of the ChipSat, followed by step 5, which is testing and the subsequent launch. Then the satellite can collect the data, which then can be building the knowledge base of ISU. What we proposed within the team is a baseline for the ChipSat, is a ChipSat which would be doing a Sputnik style beep. But then after it's built and designed, within 5 years, we are proposing ISU to further develop the release mechanism and also create a number of choices for the scientific payload that will support the base of the individual projects. Our laboratory team has put an immense effort in preparing a list of equipment and tests that are required for ISU. And if they are too expensive to purchase, then the collaboration between other institutions can be established. The test could be also outsourced. The total estimated cost of the laboratory for the ChipSat is $40,000 US, of which $15,000 would be to purchase the equipment that can serve for years and for the number of ChipSat. Additional benefit, as I mentioned, of developing the laboratory is the opportunity to collaborate of already strategic partners of ISU, such as ECAM, that could share the cost of some of the equipment and exchange professors and staff between the universities. In order to launch the ChipSats, the legal framework has to be obeyed. And our team researched and consulted the requirements and the processes that ISU have to comply with in order to send the ChipSat legally. We consulted mostly French regulations because ISU is based in France. So launching the satellite without approval is subject to fines, and it's also damage to the reputation. That's why the first step is to submit the application for registration and for amateur frequency allocation. And this is free of charge for educational institutions, and the consulted member of CNES offered that they can support ISU free of charge to complete the paperwork. However, the process is lengthy and it takes about 9 to 12 months for the registration approval, and also 18 months to receive approval for the frequency allocation. Then only after that, the paperwork for the launch can be submitted. We also considered that ISU can share some of the capacity of ChipSats with other institutions and other universities. And this is also possible, but in this case, ISU will be fully responsible for the payload and liable in case of any damages. And the big issue that we wanted to study was the space debris mitigation. Sending the swarms of ChipSats would create potentially a lot of debris in orbit. The results of our study was that ISU should aim to send the ChipSat in the low Earth orbit up to 300 kilometers, and the lifespan of the satellites will be short because they will shortly re-enter the atmosphere. We are also proposing ISU to establish the ATO Satellite Symposium to discuss the space debris mitigation strategies with other institutions and partners and alums, and we will be discussing that later in the third work stream. So moving on, the third work stream is the campaign that we are proposing for ISU to do outreach, to build the brand, and to reach out to students who are not able to get the education in space. It brings the space education closer to those regions and also is the quickest work stream to organize. At this slide, you can see the example of the outreach kit. One on the left-hand side is an educational booklet that might be prepared by ISU. And on the right-hand side, you can see the proposed chipset that our team designed for outreach purposes. You can see that chipset is about the size like it would be in reality, of course, depending on your screen size. But the students would have the number of opportunities to learn how to build and program the satellite in the classroom, and how to measure some parameters inside the classroom. This kit is designed for high school students and university students, and it costs about $30 each. So I mentioned the outreach campaign. That consists of a few steps. It would be the distribution of the kits to students, targeting underrepresented regions. It's announcing the competition, because ISU can also do competition using those chipsets on the best applications proposed by students. Then it's announcing the winners. It's distributing the prizes and organizing the annual AptoSat symposium. That symposium, as I mentioned, it would be a great ground to discuss the most burning issues and legal consideration, and also ethical considerations with partnering organizations, and convince them that using chipsets is a way forward. We already did some research on who would be interested in partnering with that campaign. Given that the payload is related to communication or positioning, SES and GSA expressed that they will be willing to participate and even covering the cost if ISU would put their logos on the kit. Specifically, SES is happy to cover the cost of the campaign, and GSA to provide the network of distribution. We also consulted the partnering organizations that are providing trainings like UNISEC and Open Cosmos, and they are willing to polish up the learning outcomes and deliver the training. Therefore, the total campaign cost that we estimated is $61,000 US, but the cost to ISU would be close to nothing. To summarize the overall timeline, as you can see at the picture, we are proposing ISU to cooperate with industry, partners, and the local communities. And this picture presents how these elements work together. And thanks to involving the industry partners, the ISU can have access to exchange the knowledge and get support with launching of high-rate scientific payloads. But also it's an opportunity to reach out to students and provide the quality education, the space education. ISU will have access to the pool of the future students, and which is the most important. As you can see, ISU is here put in the middle, because as a university, it assumes the role of a link between the community and students with industry. So in order to send the chipset within the next 5 years, ISU should commence the work starting early next year, and both to prepare the hardware and commence the legal framework. However, in the meantime, we are proposing to start the outreach campaign, because this is providing the benefits in the most quicker way, and also is building the brand of the university. We also acknowledge that the proposing of set ideas might be great and beneficial. However, to make it a reality, it puts the strain on the staff and the whole organization. And that's why we are estimating the administrative effort that is required to deliver these work streams. And we are proposing the organizational structure. We think that the program, the ISU chipset program, should be headed by the project manager, who would be reporting to ISU head of payloads. He would be supported by finance manager, who would be responsible for application for the grants, and supported by the person who will control the legal activities and coordination between CNES. The steering committee is built of alumni and partners that will be advising ISU, and also they will be supervising the individual projects. Also, outreach manager and academic manager would have their respective abbeys. To summarize the roadmap that I presented, the purpose of the ISU framework is to send own chipsets built in ISU within the 5 years. It's also to provide the quality education to around the globe, really. And I would like to reinforce that this roadmap is the path of success for 2 reasons. The first one is because it will reinforce the position of ISU as a leader in space education, and it will help achieving all ISU institutional objectives. And the second one is because our team is involving really a hard work of people that are within the team that put their hearts and hard work into making sure that ISU can enable the future educations of their nations and providing a great access to space using chipsets. And on that note, I'll hand over to Uri to present what else can we do with chipsets as examples of the future missions. Thank you. And Uri, it's over to you.
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Hello, everyone. Natalia, thank you very much. It was enlightening. And welcome to everyone. This team project was not only about space and engineering, rather it was a real collaboration and teamwork of many participants coming from many and different backgrounds and cultures. So yes, the famous ISU 3 Eyes module, international, intercultural, and interdisciplinary, was most valued for us. And we used the building and structuring concept, which we practiced during the MSS program. So for deciding which chipset missions we want to go ahead with, we began with a collaborative brainstorming. Brainstorming is the first process of which everyone can throw and imagine any type of mission that they want. And at the end of it, we came with criteria selection, which are commercial, scientific, and feasibility. Once we had this, we shortlisted the brainstorming ideas into 10 shortlist potential missions: Earth atmospheric studies, space weather forecasting, satellite health monitoring, and biological experiments. In order to make progress with this, we needed to rank each type of mission, and we ranked them according to the criteria: commercial, science, and feasibility. We gave a total number for each mission, and then we approached to the selection phase. We did realize that this table is nice, but the result of which are the best missions for us is not that obvious. Hence, we came up with this quadrant magic charts, at which we try to compare and to place engineering feasibility against the commercial value and engineering feasibility versus the scientific value. We put the missions ranking here, and once we did that, it was quite obvious to find 4 finalists, which had the highest ranking in both charts, and the highest grade was achieved by the space weather forecasting mission, and the second one was the lunar communication relay. This process of mission identification, ranking, and selection was very important for us. We were quite happy with the results, and let me introduce to you these 2 missions that we selected. We will begin with the space weather monitoring mission, and once we began to think about it, the first thing that came into mind is the mission drivers. We realized that there is a blossom of space activities, both around Earth, LEO, and on the moon. Many satellites are being launched and are going to be launched. There is a lot of interest in what's going on there, and we think the chipset may be of value. But why now? And the answer is that we realized that in the recent 5 or 10 years, there was a fundamental technological improvement in miniaturization of components that can help us to make this chipset work. Mission definition is an in situ magnetic field measurement by hundreds of chipset and LEO. In the future, we'll be able to measure other parameters comparing to these magnetic fields. These measurements will provide heliospheric research information and will help us to understand how solar events can affect on Earth magnetic fields. There are 2 major justifications for this mission. The first one is scientific, to provide interesting data to scientists. And the second one is commercial, as we believe that this type of mission will enable to provide early warning weather events to operative satellites. Here is an illustration of the mission, and we can see on the right side the great improvement of a swarm of chipsets. If we take a look at the lower end of a CubeSat, we can see that the measurement area is quite narrow, but if we spread a swarm of chipsat, they can measure a much wider area. And if we take this into the next level, we can understand that the measurement quality will be much better. We did try to develop the specific requirements of ChipSat for this mission, including position determination, communication, magnetometer accuracy, etc. And we did put them into a very specific table that defines very accurately the requirements for the mission. Having said that, we do identify that the mission is not very far away. There are some gaps, but it's something that really can be done within a short time frame. What are the technology challenges to make this mission work? Number one is position determination. If we want to make a measurement, we need to know for each measurement exactly when and where it happened. So we need to know for each chipset where it was at the time of measurement. And of course, we need to have a very, very good sensor to have a good and precise magnetic field measurement. These are the two specific mission identified gaps. We did give some thought to commercial considerations. Who are the possible alternative and competitors? Where are the possible revenue streams? And we identified that they can come from either scientific mission funds or by data subscription. And at the end of the day, we tried to come up with a summary of the total cost for such a mission. And we came with a very relatively low number between $1 and $3.5 million, which depends on the configuration. We predict about 5 years for mission go ahead to an operational swarm of chipsets doing space weather monitoring in space, which is considered to be quite relevant for us. The second mission, as you can see, is the Lunar Communication Relay, and now we are going to the moon. And in this mission, we realized that there is a lot of mission drivers comprised of the growing interest in moon space missions, namely the Artemis mission, the United States NASA program to land the first woman and next man on the moon. But there are other countries that are trying to send unmanned vehicles to the moon. And we know also that there is an expected long-term human habitation on the moon. And naturally, there will be a need to provide communication, navigation, and other relevant services. So the definition of this mission is to deploy a temporary chipset network in low lunar orbit, which will act as a relay between the astronaut rover and surface crews. And of course, because we need to have a larger area and distance communication capabilities, they will probably communicate it to a central CubeSat that will act as a central gateway. Justification to this mission includes operational, communication coverage, commercial, lower cost comparing to any other alternative that will provide a space-related communication on the moon. And we came with another value of the mission, which is a secondary scientific mission. Once the mission is over, we will try to guide the chipset to dive into the moon. And when they land, they will have some sensors that will enable them to collect and transmit local scientific data. Again, as in the previous mission, we analyzed very deeply the specific requirements that are needed for this mission. We came with decent requirements for the communication relay, for the ability to provide a mesh network topology, a very good IMU supporting 9-axis degrees of freedom for the attitude determination, and the sensor, of course, we need to provide the capabilities for the secondary mission. We also list all these requirements in a very detailed table after all the engineering analysis and budgets. And again, we came into a conclusion that this mission is quite close with respect to the gaps. The technology challenges that are identified here are as follows. The first one is the radiation damage to the chipsets. They will not be, as in the previous mission, orbiting the Earth, so they will not have the magnetic field protection, and the radiation can damage them. And the second one is the photovoltaic cells efficiency, because the mission time is supposed to be longer, and if they will be in the shadow of the moon, by the moon of the sun, then perhaps there will be a challenge to provide the power to the system. Respect to commercial considerations, again, we considered alternatives and competitors. We considered possible revenue streams by either space agencies or scientific grants. And we tried to think and to analyze the cost budget, which came to up to $1.5 million. Again, depends on the configuration, how many chipsets and CubeSats. And this price doesn't consider the cost of the launch itself to the moon. And as with the previous mission, we came into a conclusion that given the relevant resources, engineering, and budgets, such a mission timeframe could be something like 5 years from kickoff. This brings my part to an end. I think we can go back from the moon to Earth, and let me call back my friend Marco to lead the next part of the presentation.
Mind, we performed a master SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It's a comprehensive SWOT, so we will not go through all of them, but we will touch on the high level ones that we identified. The massive cost reduction is really the key strength in delivering ChipSat missions. It's unprecedented in their delivery to market, and lower costs helps facilitate that. We identified the shortened mission lifetime of chipsats as a key weakness, and this hinders the ability to deploy key applications for chipsats, and this will need to be addressed going forward. The key opportunity here is that chipsats, if deployed in large architectures, distributed systems, is a great opportunity to deliver on novel applications supporting onboard payloads. And the threat that we identified here is the issue with space debris. The space environment is a busy place, and the threat of damage to other platforms in space is a threat, not just to those platforms, but to all other platforms that share the space environment. The challenges here in this table really outline a number of issues that we believe need to be discussed in forthcoming conversations. There is no fundamental or universally accepted definition of chipsats, which is curious. And we believe the justification for this being an issue is chipsats will be portrayed as a high-risk category or classification of satellites. The second is the issue with policy. There are few surrounding space debris, and this presents barriers to obtaining clearances and licensing for launch, and this will need to be addressed accordingly. Concerning the technological challenges associated with space debris mitigation of chipsats, we touched on a few earlier with the onboard storage and ACDS system, and this hinders the ability to mature the chipsat onto the commercial market. Concerning payloads and subsystems, their capability has limitations due to the chipsat volume and mass constraints. The chipsat itself is dimensioned as quite small, and this significantly limits the ability to provide applications for chipsats going forward. So to that end, we have outlined a series of recommendations across the disciplines that underpin this project. We talked about technology a few times now in the presentation. We know that the power storage capabilities of chipsats are premature, and this will need to be developed accordingly if we're to expand the lifetime of chipsats in future missions. Attitude maneuverability is also hindered, and unless there is an appropriate system to help orientate chipsats, their maturation to the market will continue to be stagnant. And of course, we need to develop a thermal protection system for the chipsat. We need to regulate and manage temperatures on board so that we can put payloads on board to deliver applications effectively. Concerning the legal recommendations that we have outlined, we need to continue to develop space debris guidelines and also find the place in which chipsats fall into that. And we would recommend that for all future ChipSat missions, that there be a legal supervisor to handle and supervise the delivery of those missions. We need to obtain the relevant frequency licensing and allocations for ChipSats to be launched. Concerning the ISU ChipSat program, we've been very prudent, I believe, in our recommendations. We need to apply for scientific grants to expand the existing setup for ISU to develop and manufacture chipsets. And we believe that this should involve partners in advisory capacities. And to what Natalia was saying earlier, to form a steering committee to make informed and key decisions on the direction of chipset development at ISU. We need to develop a knowledge base so that we can adhere to the educational institutional standards that ISU self-imposes, and to also help develop technology for chipsets as a whole. Concerning the missions that Uri touched on, space weather monitoring, we'll talk about that first. He mentioned radiation in the space environment, and we will need to develop viable shielding strategies to the hostile radiation environment in space. And we will need to develop sensors to better characterize the space phenomena that are characteristic in the space environment if we were to deliver a mission for space weather monitoring. Concerning the Lunar Communication Relay, again, sensor technologies will be underpinning the drive for this mission. We considered looking at radiation and seismographs as potential payload options, and that should inform the conversations for sensor development going forward. And of course, being a communication mission, we would need to bolster the communication capabilities of the ChipSat platform. We know that the antenna on board is limited in its capabilities, and if this is enhanced, we can better serve the future missions that go to the moon. We're mindful that Lunar Gateway is only a few short years away. And of course, we circle back to the definition of the ChipSat. We believe that a standardized work group should get together and really clarify on what the ChipSat is and implement this definition industry-wide. To conclude, we believe that the emergence of chipsets is an opportunity. It opens up new possibilities and applications, and we've touched on 2 new missions, and we'll touch on them again in a second. We believe that chipsets are simple, they are cost efficient, and they lower the barriers to entry to space, and through their redundancy are able to create novel new architectures, which would be exciting for future missions. Concerning the ISU ChipSat program, the outreach campaign that Natalia outlined earlier seeks to achieve the institutional goals that ISU has self-imposed. And we want to augment the education that ISU delivers going forward using chipsets as a platform to do that. Space weather monitoring is an exciting prospect. The variety and quantity and accuracy of the data collected enables the calibration of space weather forecasting models. And this will inform a lot of commercial players who use satellite platforms to deliver services on Earth. And we believe a chipset will bring value to those entities. For the Lunar Communication Relay, we believe a chipsat swarm provides a temporary solution during out of sight or poor coverage periods. During lunar exploration, there may be times when crews will be exploring regions of poor coverage, and the implementation of a chipset architecture may be able to facilitate those periods of troubled communication. So we circle back to potential evolution. We realize that the full potential of swarms of chipsets can enable innovative mission architectures. We've touched on 2 of them already. And if they work together, great things can happen, and they show considerable promise. The time to market is faster than traditional platforms. And compared to those platforms, they are also cheaper as a collective system working together. Are they better? Depends on the mission that you're aiming towards. But one thing is for sure, as satellites work together, the future looks bright with space missions. Of course, this concludes our sharing of information on Chipsets. However, we are not yet done. We have a number of people we would like to thank in the delivery of this project. I think for all of us in Team Chipset, we can all agree that none of this would have been possible without our beloved supervisors, Professor Gongling Sun and Professor Taiwo Tejimola. We do appreciate your time, energy, and guidance over the past couple of months, and we do hope that we remain in touch going forward. Of course, we must thank the abundance of external support they received over the course of this team project, and they are listed here, and we hope that they're tuning in, and we want to let you know that we appreciate all that you've done to help us. This is a short clip about some of the values that Team Chipset wanted to share with you. Please enjoy. Here are a few images that we were happy to share with you. They are taken over the course of the past 7 to 8 months during the project period. We're a busy bunch, and every opportunity we took to have dinner or have lunch or activities while on assignment were taken. I think many of us will cherish the memories of having an aside god of fun every week, where their role was solely to inject fun into all our team project meetings. And of course, the antics continued. Here are a few more shots taken during our meal making times later in the team project period. And that's a wrap. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for tuning in. I would like to invite Team Chipsat's panelists for the Q&A, Morgan Lekas, Sahaz Dayal, Mohamed El Haroui, and Guillaume Oliveira. We're happy to listen to your questions, your ideas, and your thoughts. Thank you.
I think I will start. Thank you very much for this very engaging and motivating presentation, and also for mastering the constraints of the remote presentation so nicely, except maybe during the last movie. I think you've done a great job, both in the past months and in the past hour. So thank you very much for that. Congratulations for finding sponsors already, and for acknowledging the workload that may represent on the staff to develop this project and proposing solutions to ease the process. So I would just have a couple of quick questions. In the report, you've got a discussion on the educational booklet to be delivered in April 2020, and I think Natalia said that it might be developed. So more generally, how do you feel about the timescale for this project, the 5 years roadmap? Do you think this is something aggressive that will require lots of investment of time and energy, or do you think that's something that's very reasonable and that could work out nicely?
Thank you, Bertrand, for the question. I'm going to refer you to, of course, Natalia. She'll be happy to take it.
Thank you, Marco. Thank you, Bertrand, for this great question. I was leading the roadmap team, so I'm capable to answer that. Thank you that you enjoyed the presentation. And answering your question, I'd like to say that the booklet is something that we are proposing ISU to be developed. Of course, that would be an internal effort of the professors. However, the partnering organizations like UNISEC or Open Cosmos are willing to help. That will be developed in further. We haven't done that. We only developed the ChipSat. However, it can be spread across months. It depends when ISU want to deliver the campaign. In our aggressive plan, we decided to deliver the campaign already next year.
What about the whole 5 years process? Would you call this aggressive, or is this a reasonable timescale?
The process for the whole roadmap to deliver the ChipSat within 5 years is reasonable, considering that ISU will start as soon as next year. We estimated the time, including the buffer time, but also you need to be mindful that applying for the registration of the ChipSat can take up to 18 months. So to prepare to launch, we need to start soon.
Okay, thank you. And the other question would be about equipment. I really much enjoyed that you did this effort to predict the equipment that would be needed, look for solutions, put quotes on what we would need to buy possibly. And I was wondering whether you consider also the thermal vacuum chamber that we have. I think you proposed to buy one. Have you looked at the one we have?
Yes, so the short answer is yes, we considered what ISU already has. We checked if the equipment is working, and we recommended what needs to be further purchased.
My question was about the thermal chamber that we have, which may allow as well for some sort of vacuum. Can it be used, or do we need to buy a new one?
So we're recommending that we outsource this. However, with a further maybe modification, we can estimate whether the ISU one will work in the future.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
On to Daniela.
Thank you, Bertrand. Thank you very much, ChipSat. You did very good presentation. And I saw your efforts in everything, like writing report and working very hard, especially now during this hard period. I will came with two very short questions. It's like related to your case of Lunar Communication Relay. So I know that you already mentioned the lifetime of ChipSats, but I would like to know, in case of Lunar Communication Relay, what will be a time life estimation of ChipSats? And the second question is, do you think the ChipSat will be efficient in establishment of lunar navigation ChipSat system?
Hi, Daniela. Thank you. I would like to refer you to Sahaz, if you'd be happy to chime in.
Thank you, Marco, and thank you, Daniela, for the question. In terms of the timeline for the lunar mission, what we proposed in our report in more detail was to have CubeSats in low lunar orbit with ChipSats on board ready to deploy. And we have estimated that the CubeSats would last in the orbit for around 12 months. And they would deploy the ChipSats as they are needed by the rover activities that would be going on the lunar surface. So the total timeline that the mission would last from arriving in low lunar orbit to its end would be 12 months. And relating to your second question, we have not explored navigation with ChipSats on the lunar surface in detail through this report. It was one of the missions that we were initially throwing around during the first brainstorming session we had as a team. But at the end of the day, we figured that the lunar communication would be a more beneficial mission, especially for the upcoming years with the Artemis program and all the other commercial lunar programs that are coming into play.
Okay, thank you. That will be maybe just like the next, case studies for the next generation. Okay, that's it from my side. I pass floor to my colleague who is coming after me.
Hello, this is Juan Dalmau speaking. I would like to congratulate Team ChipSat for your very high technology readiness level. I would say you are at TRL at least 7, because you have proven that every component of the team is qualified for flight. So I encourage you to move on to TRL 8 and have your first qualification flight with the roadmap, with the actual implementation of the roadmap. My question is about TRLs. You have identified power storage as one of the technologies that still need to be developed so that you can store power on board the ChipSat. Have you estimated the time and the effort that it would take for the TRL of power storage to be brought up to 7 or 8, and especially how much time it would take, because that would obviously dictate the rest of the timeline in your roadmap. Over to you.
Thank you, Juan, for the words and the question. I would like you to hear that from Guillaume, if you're happy to chat more about that.
Yes, of course. Thank you very much for the question, Juan. Specifically for the power storage, we have seen that one of the main limitations is the thermal control of the chipset. If we don't have a really good thermal control, we cannot evolve with the technology regarding the batteries. What we have seen is that one of the first things that have to be developed is the attitude control for the chipset. This will allow to point the chipset directly to the sun and will allow the chipset not to have really a battery storage there and to be functional throughout maybe half of the orbit.
Thank you very much. I would like to hand over, I believe it's Dr. Taiwo right now.
Thank you very much, Juan. And I want to say congratulations to the ChipSat team. I followed through your program from the beginning. I think you guys have done very well. And I'm really very happy to see your presentation and to see you succeed today. So I just have a question. If you have, I'm sure most of us, I mean, the space industry, the technology that is very popular now is CubeSat, and your proposal is that we can scale down more in terms of mass, in terms of cost for this mission using ChipSat. So for CubeSat, presently, most of the failure are linked to, I mean, most of mission failure based on research are linked to communication system, power system abnormality. So my question is, how confident are you that the proposed ChipSat missions will not have the same drawback? I mean, the missions you have proposed, how confident are you that the communication system you are using may be direct to Earth, or using space relay system, and also the power system? How confident are you based on what you have presented today linked to the TRL? I hand over to you.
Thank you, Taiwo. Mohammed, would you be happy to weigh in?
Yes, thanks, Marco and Taiwo. It's a really good question. Right now, we are fairly confident that technology we have today, as we saw from the technology readiness level review, that the chipsets would be able to function. But something that is important to understand is that when you send a CubeSat, you have maybe a few CubeSats. So it is easier to have a failure. But one of the powerful point of chipsats is that you send many chipsats. You have a swarm of chipsats. So your chances of mission failure goes a lot down. And that is the important point to understand about chipsats. And the TRL level is already quite high. A few missions have been flown. So overall, the technology is in a good place.
Okay, thank you very much. That's a good point to more systems, pointing to more systems as a form of increasing reliability. So I think I'm good, and I would like to hand over to Gongli Song.
Okay, thank you, Taiwo. And first, it's really I'm really happy about your presentation. It's really excellent, and I'm really happy also working with you in the past few months. And also, I have to say sorry and for my absence for the last 3 weeks because of the pandemic tough time. And could you please go back to the page 8, please?
And I would like to hand over to Gongli Song.
Page 8. Okay, thank you. And first, it's yeah. From here, I'm just following also the question from Juan, and from here for the technical readiness level, and most of the time this is we could see is from 7 to 9, and so by the definition, the 9 means this is flight proving, and so can you make some example for the past programs and the use of this kind of hardwares and realizing the target and considering about the mass budget and also for the power itself? Yeah, from here, I'm just following the.
Hi, Garling. Thanks again for your question, and it's very good to have you back. And we're very happy to see you join us today. I'm going to refer the question to Guillaume, associated to TRLs. Guillaume.
Hey, thank you very much for the question. Of course, a TRL of 9 means that the system has flown several times, and it has shown that it is very reliable in space. This is why, for example, let's start for the microcontroller. We have proposed a CC430. It's a microcontroller that has been used for the only successful mission for chipsets, which is ChipSat2, and for several CubeSats. This is why we have identified the system to be of a high TRL. Then the PCBs, of course, it's one of the main components of CubeSats, and it has shown that it's very reliable in space, as well as the communication system and the power, which, for example, for the power, we have a type of photovoltaic cell that is one called triangular photovoltaic cell that has been extensively used for CubeSats, as well for the chipsets that has already been flown. For several.
And out of this, and I just take an example for the communication, and because during the presentation you mentioned several times about the communication itself is both application. One is the communication between the satellite, maybe with other one is for the data relay, and which level, I mean, for the data transmission, like the data rate and also the transmission, and for either for the signal or for the data has to be transmitted.
Professor Gongling, if I may, I'm going to refer you to Sahas. She may be able to help you clarify the details for those missions. Sahas?
Thank you, Marco. Professor Gongling, do you mind repeating the question? I was getting a little feedback here on my end.
Okay, and this, I just make the question short, is for communication, chipset communication. At this moment, because from here I can see that the technical level is pretty high, is from 7 to 8, 7 to 9, and at the current situation, and what is the data transmission rate, and also the data transmission distance, and for your chipset, for your.
Yes, so for the space weather and for the lunar missions, we haven't dug that much into detail in terms of identifying the data rates and whatnot, but the high level primary architecture of communication would be, at the moment, the chipsats would be communicating with the ground station with the use of the relay CubeSat. So the chipsats, we don't think currently have the capability of communicating directly to a ground station. So the main communication, the transferring of data and the communication from the ground station to the chipsats would be happening through the CubeSat relays.
Okay, thank you, Shahas. And that's all from my side. And so I'm very happy to hand it over to Virginia.
Thank you very much, Gongling. And thank you, Chipsat team. Good job. I have a question about the outreach, the education and outreach impacts of the program you have laid out for us. Do you think that having a chipset project like what you've described happening at ISU would play a role in attracting students to ISU? And if so, what kind of student?
Hi, Virginia. Thanks for the question. I'm afraid we had some feedback at the start of your question. Would you mind running through that one more time?
Sure. So I want to ask you about the education and outreach impact of your project for ISU. Do you think that having a project as the one you've described happening at ISU would play a role in attracting students? And if so, what kind of student?
Virginia, I'm going to refer you to Natalia. She may be able to illuminate you more on that.
Sure. Virginia, I would love to answer your question. However, we did have a break in connection just when you pointed to the core of the question. I know that you want to have an answer. Would that help ISU to get more students? Could you just repeat which part? Virginia?
I'm sorry, I lost your audio.
It's not a lucky date, isn't it? So I would love to answer your question about the reaching out to more students, to bring more students to ISU. However, I would be interested in which part of outreach are you interested?
So we will try a third time, and if this fails, we will move on to the next speaker. What kind of student do you think would be attracted to ISU if ISU were running your program?
3 times the charm. So we are referring to the students of different disciplines, because ISU is the interdisciplinary university, of course. So we want to involve students in more getting on the side of STEM predominantly, and especially we're reaching out to women and to the countries that don't have the space education at the moment. So we want to get them interested in how satellites are participating in our lives, and also how to program the satellite and how to use them in their own classroom.
Excellent, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Professor Zervos.
Yes, thank you very much for this presentation. I think it was very useful, and I was quite actually relieved and quite proud to see you doing a good work when you're dealing with a bifocal project, because these are much more challenging than a unifocal project that sometimes people are used to be dealing with. So I have a couple of quick questions, one for each of the two main focal points that you have in your work and in your report. The first one deals with the challenges that many of the previous faculty brought up insofar as the ChipSat configuration is concerned. Do you think that when compared with other, let's say, more traditional, more standardized mission approaches, there are clear benefits in terms of the risk, or rather in terms of the cost that would outweigh the TRL and the risk associated with the ChipSat? So that's the question with regards to the wider ChipSat, if you want, focus. And the second, with regards to the ISU, relates to whether you considered the trade-offs, the challenges associated with ISU's role from being an education enabler to an integrator of ChipSat and operator for the respective missions.
Thank you, Professor Zervos. I suggest we tackle the two questions in two separate parts. The first, I'd like to invite Uri to chime in. Uri?
Yes, hello, and thank you, Professor Vasilis, for this question. The question, to my understanding, has to do with the risks, commercial risk of developing the technology and the missions. And the answer is, I think, it's a two-head answer. From one hand, we can think about the final mission characteristics and try to analyze the real value. So for example, if we're talking about space communication, we can think about the array of chipsets and trying to calculate analytically the relation between them, the determination of their relative orientation and positioning, and to try to analyze the value of communication of this array. This is a very, very challenging thing. You can do it probably with the paper and a pen or some computerized aids. You don't need to develop the chipset for that. And this is the big challenge, and this is quite risky because the questions are very, very large and we don't have so much information. On the other hand, you can go bottom up and say, okay, I'm going to start to develop only a prototype chipset, something that is small, that is working, a proof of concept. And then I'm going to add a little bit more functionality and a little bit more, and I'm going to grow on marginally. With this approach, you risk less money on each step. And when you identify the challenge of the next one, you can consider the risk versus the relevant cost to that stage. So answering your question, I think that if we take the second approach, it will be more, I would say, relaxed investment in each step as you risk lower amount of funds to answer each specific questions.
Thank you, Uri. That makes good sense. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Good afternoon, Chipsters, and heartiest congratulations on your very inspiring presentation. I've just one question, particularly a scientific question with some material science involved therein. My question is this: You talked about radiation damage, but would you like to comment on the type, the origin and type of radiation and the damage incurred?
Thank you, Professor Hill. It's good to hear from you. I would like to refer to Uri, being our mission specialist. Uri?
Yes, hi. But now I have to apologize because I had some pause in the communication. So may I ask Professor Hill to repeat the question?
Yeah, yes, of course, Uri. The question is very predictable, very simple in a sense, but very meaningful. Would you like to comment on the origin of the radiation, the damaging radiation, and the type of radiation damage incurred?
Yeah, so normally we have two types of radiations. Radiations coming from the sun itself, the solar ejection radiation, and we have a galactic radiation that is coming from externally to the solar system. Normally, both radiations are being filtered out by the Earth's magnetic field. So for missions that are closer to Earth or to any actually celestial body that has such a magnetic field, we can think that the potential damage is lower. But once you go out of that, for example, to the moon, and we don't have that magnetic field that will protect us, the amount of highly energized particles will be larger. Hence, we'll need more, I would say, efficient protection. And the damages of a radiation can definitely damage the electronic components and cause electrical failure.
What about extragalactic radiation?
What?
What about extragalactic radiation? Would you expect any contribution from it?
Well, I don't know. The honest answer is that I don't know. From outside the Milky Way, the energy and the radiation that is going, that is coming in from that distance, I don't have at the moment a good answer with respect to its energy, its energy potential to make damage to the chipset itself.
Many thanks, Uri. May I pass the floor to my colleague, Professor Peters?
I'm not sure if he is actually online or not, so just give him a second or two to speak up if he is. Otherwise, I shall leap in because there's about 3 minutes left of the Q&A period. No, okay, my go then. Last set of questions for you. Disadvantage of going last is all the fun technical questions you've got asked. So, yeah, I'll ask some questions that kind of to do with, I don't know, kind of liaison / interface aspects. I mean, for instance, there was a suggestion to have an ATO satellite symposium at ISU. Certainly a possibility. But there are already a number of small sat, CubeSat, symposia. In fact, the Utah small sat symposium has been going for more than 30 years now. So I guess my question is, did you do any sort of market analysis to see if there was a gap in the market for an annual ATOSAT symposium, or whether it might not be better dealt with as a part of one of the existing activities?
Hi, Chris. Thanks for the question. I think Natalia's got an answer to that.
Okay.
Thank you for your question, Chris. And indeed, we did have the market evaluation. As you say, there is many of small satellite symposium or in general satellite symposium, but our ones that at the SAT symposium will be unique. It's because it's designed to strengthen the bonds between the ISU partners and others. And this will be the audience for the symposium. It's also to talk about specific issues of chipsets and this class satellites.
Okay, thank you for that. Well, while Natalia's here, I've got a second question then. I mean, you proposed the setting up of an ISU ChipSat laboratory with a number of staff. I mean, ISU already has a space payloads laboratory. how do you see the interface between those? You know, what communication did you have with the Space Payloads Laboratory?
So we analyzed what is available at ISU, and we wanted to propose the solution that will be a department of ISU Space Payloads Laboratory.
So your vision is that the ChipSat laboratory is part of the Space Payloads Laboratory?
That's correct. And if I can refer to, I won't be scrolling the slides now, but one of the slides showed the organizational structure. And that's why we are proposing that the ChipSat laboratory will have a project manager that will directly report to ISU Space Payloads Laboratory.
Okay, thank you for that. I was going to ask another question, not of you, of Yuri, but actually the 30 minutes have just gone up, and I know you've all been working very hard, so I won't ask any more questions, and I'm the last person to ask questions. So thank you very much to Team ChipSat for an excellent online presentation. I'm impressed, you know, how smoothly it went, except maybe for the loss of sound at the end, but you know, I think clearly you've been doing kind of many rehearsals, and this is as I say, a learning experience for all of us. You know, I think the faculty have learned that when they're asking questions, they need to turn off the audio on their computer, otherwise we get a loop of audio coming around. So thank you very much. You can now relax. To everybody out there listening, there will be a short pause. And we will be back at 12:30 when Team SETI will tell us about their work. So you know, congratulations once again to Team ChipSat. First time I've seen a presentation given by multiple people in multiple places like that. So now go and put your feet up and wait and watch Team SETI. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
It's been a pleasure.
Well, good afternoon again, everybody, and welcome back to Strasbourg International Space University for the second of our MSc in Space Studies Class of 2020 team project presentations. So we're moving now from, if you like, small technology to the vastness of space and the big questions. So I'm very pleased to introduce the next team project, Extraterrestrial Intelligence, the Search, the Science, and the Significance. Over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope that you are receiving me well, because as you may know, our laboratory here on board of the International Lunar Space Station is still under construction. So we could experiment a bit of delay in communication or even a drop. However, first of all, I would like to thank you for being here today with me in this important day. We are on the 14th of May 2080. And I'm here speaking to you in behalf of the Interstellar Anthropological Research Institute. As you may know, the Interstellar Anthropological Research Institute is the galactic institute that is studying our interaction with extraterrestrial intelligence, or with exosapiens, how we named them after our first contact back in 2013. The objectives of today is to show you some footage of the documentary that we would like to ask you to produce for the anniversary of next year. That will be the 50th anniversary of that contact. And today you will see some of the protagonists of the student project that back in 2020 posed the basis for the first detection, and some of the protagonists of the research of today. As you know, next year will be this 50th anniversary, and here at the Interstellar Anthropological Research Institute, we thought that was worth to produce a documentary showing the original story. However, let me start from the beginning. I would like to explain what is SETI. SETI is the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. And accordingly to the International Academy of Astronautics, is the means and technology and scientific research related to detection of possible extraterrestrial signals. As I said, back in 2020, this group of students at the International Space University developed a project understanding the importance of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. What they did at that time was to increase the chance of finding extraterrestrial intelligence. And of course, today, we know how it ended. They understood that in order to do that, it was important to create a framework in the legal and policy aspect, and also in the science and technology background. In order to increase the chance of finding extraterrestrial intelligence, the first step should have been to develop a public outreach plan to increase awareness on people's perception on this topic. They then developed an outreach plan to do this, that leads later to increase the relationship between international research institutions and to raise funding for developing new technologies and projects on the research of extraterrestrial intelligence, and also on developing a legal framework that later became an international law and was useful after the first detection. Today, we will show you some clips that are from our archive at the Interstellar Anthropological Research Institute. So you will see some of the protagonists of that project, and these are from the past. But we will also have with us live from all over the solar system some of our colleagues. First of all, there will be our PhD candidate, Ankita Das, that will present you the technology back in 2020 that was the base of the research for extraterrestrial intelligence. And later, her professor, my distinguished colleague, Dr. Erica Crowley, will teach us on the proposal that these students at the International Space University developed. Later, I'm very pleased to say that we will have with us the director of the UN Office for Relationship with Exosapiens, Dr. Giuliana Rotola, that is the granddaughter of that Giuliana Rotola that was part of the original team of students at the ISU team project. And she will tell us what was the idea on a legal, ethical, and policy framework on the topic. Finally, I'm also glad to say that we'll have with us Saba El-Shawa, that is the director of the Quantum Technology for Space Institute, and is the granddaughter of another member of the original team, Saba El-Shawa, that worked on the outreach plan for increasing the awareness on people. And my colleague here today will teach us on what they developed. As you know, today we are able to travel all around the solar system, thanks to many technology fields, but also thanks to the contact that we made that first time in 2030 with extraterrestrial intelligence. And we are also able to travel beyond the boundaries of the solar system, and we have several spaceships that are going through the stars. But without any more hesitation, let me introduce the first part of our documentary. Please enjoy and see you later.
Breaking news.
Breaking news has just emerged. Reports confirm we are indeed experiencing a first contact event. Contact occurred sometime in the early hours in Strasbourg, France. It still remains unclear what the intentions of the extraterrestrial race are, but governments across the world are telling people to remain calm.
It's been 5 years since we made the first contact.
Yes.
We've made some incredible progress since then.
We have, thanks to our new friends.
Apparently you were involved in the project that led them contacting us. Could you tell more about it?
Right. It was the Space Telescope project.
Please.
Of course. The project started a long time ago. I remember that back then the whole SETI initiative was massively underfunded. But we were part of a team that believed in SETI initiative. So to put a little bit into context, at that moment the James Webb Telescope was being developed, and also another missions related to exoplanets like Plateau, for instance. So everyone was talking about exoplanets. And I think that we made a difference because we said, okay, the space infrastructure is gonna be there. So why don't we use those telescopes to search for technosignatures? And that is what we did. We proposed a mission, a project to piggyback on those space telescopes.
Technosignatures?
Technosignatures. To put it in a simple way, technosignatures are signals referring to space objects that are not natural, so they should be related with any kind of intelligence. But actually we proposed a previous mission, a CubeSat mission, to sense and characterize the signal coming from Earth. And we did this because we believe that using this information would help us to search for technosignatures in the galaxy, in our galaxy. I mean with this, to search for extraterrestrial civilizations in our galaxy.
What do you mean by that?
We have this idea that civilizations would produce noise, interference if you will, and that this could be sensed, observed from space. The only thing is that we didn't know how this would look like.
I see. So your CubeSat was successful?
Not exactly, but it was an important stepping stone. I mean, the whole initiative was important. The key was to merge the data from the space telescopes and from the CubeSat mission. And I think that, yes, that in that case, the whole initiative helped us to find them.
Well, I mean, it worked out. People are now saying that realistic interstellar travel is less than 10 years away now. You played a key role in that.
It is incredible, really. Back then, we were just a team of university students, and we never expected to secure the funding for this project, let alone to achieve the results, this type of results in our life.
But you did it. It happened.
Yes, I think we did it. We finally did it. But it was all about the team. From the beginning, we had a clear idea, and we were united by the same cause. I would say that we just stand on the shoulders of those giants of the past who made the science and technology possible for us. And we took the opportunity to go for a dream. We believe in that dream. We work for that dream. And one day that dream came true.
Greetings. Thank you for including me in this work. I am Ankita, and I'm carrying out my PhD at the Interstellar Research Anthropological Research Institute, researching communications with extraterrestrial intelligence under the guidance of Professor Crowley. Today, I will briefly touch upon some of the introductory aspects that were addressed in the science section of the report of IC students in the year 2020. The report discussed the state of SETI back then and the technology used. It then goes to provide a few general recommendations. The report also provides a detailed technosignature detection mission proposal. The methods used to search for extraterrestrial intelligence in the late 1900s and in the early 2000s was to look for two types of signals: biosignatures and technosignatures. Biosignatures are telltale signs that a planet might be hosting life. By observing the biosphere of our own planet and how the properties have changed over the 4.5 billion years, it gives researchers an analog that assists them when it comes to finding life elsewhere in the Milky Way. Biosignatures can be definitive or potential. Definitive biosignatures, as the name suggests, definitely comes from a biological source, whereas potential biosignatures may have an abiotic origin. There are three types of biosignatures: gaseous, surface, and temporal. Gaseous biosignatures are spectral features that are observable in the planet's atmosphere that is a result of a biological activity. When there are no evident gaseous biosignatures, scientists look for pigmentation in the surface of the planet, which might be an indicator for life. Temporal biosignatures are a result of the planet's biosphere acting on the environment as a whole, producing time-dependent modulations. Temporal biosignatures were not clearly understood back then as compared to now. However, it is to be kept in mind that the presence of life alone does not mean the presence of intelligent life. This is where technosignatures come into the picture. The term technosignatures is derived from a combination of the words technological and signature, and the search for them involves this looking for signs that suggest the presence of some form of technology. The idea was that technology was an indicator for not just life, but intelligent life. The first technosignature searches took place in the mid to late 1900s, and it involved looking for signals in the radio part of the electromagnetic spectrum. The radiation received by a radio telescope was divided into two components. It was then amplified by the receiver before being detected by a detector. Radio wavelengths were chosen because of limitations in technology back then. However, in the early 2000s, with the development of technologies in optical photometry, high contrasting imaging systems, and infrared photometry, focus began shifting towards optical and infrared searches as well. Theories on the types of technosignatures were modeled on the technology found on Earth. This was due to the fact that it was very unlikely that humanity would be able to detect a signature that was incomprehensible or out of scope to the then technological capabilities. Here, you can see the electromagnetic spectrum. In 1959, Giuseppe Cacconi and Philip Morrison proposed that detectable signals would likely be in the range of 1 to 10,000 gigahertz. Values lower than these would be attenuated by the interstellar medium or not heard at all. And values higher would be absorbed by the atmospheres of planetary bodies. This search was then expanded upon, and the range was modified between 1400 and 1700 megahertz. The 21 centimeter line wavelength, or 1420 megahertz, is the frequency at which hydrogen, which is the most common element in the universe, emits at. The hydroxyl band sits between 1612 and 1720 megahertz, representing the upper bound of this range. It is this magical frequency that has been referred to as the universal water hole, since the combination of these two compounds results in the creation of water. This term is also a symbolic reference to the watering holes in the African plains where multiple species would come together and feed, thus representing a common ground where several species could communicate with one another. Optical searches were also performed, as you can see over here, and they were done in the visible and near-infrared portions of the spectrum. In order to understand the technosignature proposal of the students of 2020, we need to look at some of the limitations that were present, such as there were a limited number of instruments and infrastructure that dedicated the time to SETI searches. There existed inconsistent documentation, and many projects were limited by time. SETI searches back then were also challenged by limited bandwidth and post-processing power. As the field of technosignatures evolved, researchers began proposing novel methods for detection of technosignatures. Some of the new next-generation technosignatures that appeared in the literature of the early 21st century are the following. Number one, light curves can be used to detect artificial artifacts and megastructures in transit around stars. For example, the construction or the usage of stellar engines by an extraterrestrial civilization. Some of you might be aware that this is how we first detected exosapiens. It was initially thought to be an anomaly in the light curve before we were contacted by them. Number two, in 2015, it was proposed that other Earth-like civilizations will produce detectable thermal signatures as a result of combating a possible global warming on a planetary scale. This civilization will then be forced to adopt a technology which will enable them to discard the excess heat in certain areas, producing heat signatures which will be detectable by telescopes on Earth. Number three, intelligent extraterrestrials may use asteroids as a source of raw materials to enhance their civilizations as a result of limitations on their own planet. This can be detected through observations of targeted asteroid mining. In order for a civilization to advance out in its own solar system, it would involve a level of engineering that is likely not possible using just the raw materials of the surface planet alone. Finally, as a main sequence star ages, it begins to expand into the red giant phase. This alters the habitable zone around the star, and therefore a planet which previously orbited in this zone would end up receiving excess amount of radiation on its surface. One potential solution to prevent the extinction of a civilization would be to develop a star shade, which would block some of the radiation from the star falling on the planet. These star shades would result in changes of brightness of the star and will be detectable by the transit method. Like we have seen previously, there were many technosignature searches that were being proposed at this time. In such a scenario, some searches must be prioritized over others. Sophia Sheikh proposed the technosignature axis of merit, shown here to rank the existing and proposed technosignature searches and what will be the most feasible, taking into account various considerations. This ranking system took into account both practical and scientific considerations. Practical considerations included observing capability, whether the search could be performed immediately or only after certain advancement in technology was possible. Cost was an important factor given that SETI searches were underfunded back then. The list of factors also looked at if there are any non-scientific benefits of the proposed search. The scientific considerations included the detectability, longevity, and the ambiguity of the technosignature. Sheikh also considered how advanced the technosignature was compared to the Earth's technology. Finally, inevitability of the technosignature and the amount of information possessed by the technosignature was also taken into account. With this background in mind, the IC report proposed a technosignature detection mission. The details of this mission will be presented to you by my supervisor, Professor Erica Crowley.
Thank you, Ankita, for that excellent summary on the current state of technosignatures in 2020. I am Dr. Erica Crowley, and collectively, we are very proud to be involved with this work at the Interstellar Anthropological Research Institution, because 2020 was a very important time in history for the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Beyond reporting the current state of the search, the graduate students at the International Space University proposed a revolutionary two-part initiative, and this included the Space Telescopes Project and the CubeSat mission. The students considered the Space Telescope missions that were related to exoplanets at the time. They created this table to summarize the missions. The first three missions are the ones that were active at the time that they were working on the project, and the students reported the objectives, partners, launch dates, and locations associated with the missions. But the last four were expected to be launched in later years, although the students acknowledged that the COVID-19 pandemic at the time might have impacted the mission schedules and delayed the associated launches. We now know the full impact that COVID-19 had, and it is incredible that the students achieved so much during this pandemic. The students used the knowledge from these missions to propose the Galactic Technosignature Observatory Project, the GTO project. As summarized beside me here, the objective was to use the data from current and future space telescope missions to search for artificial objects in transitioning exoplanets or within the vicinity of their stars. The data was to be used to define perimeters for the search for artificial objects. At this time in 2020, the discovery of a planet with orbiting artifacts was seen as a significant indicator of an intelligent civilization. The proposed project took advantage of the current and upcoming space telescope missions to create an exoplanet database that would include technosignatures. The second part of the students' proposal was the Noisy Cube mission, and you can see this visually represented below. The objective of this mission was to quantify the signature produced as a result of satellite constellations and space debris. And this was proposed to enable scientists to focus their search on similar signals obtained from exoplanets. The students wanted to characterize Earth's technosignature as seen from the journey from Earth to Mars and beyond. The idea was that the mission would piggyback on the launch vehicle of an existing mission to Mars. And the CubeSat payload would contain a radiometric sensor, spectrometer, and hyperspectral imaging camera. And taken together, these payloads would collect data on the noise produced by Earth from a distance. So this two-part initiative was composed of the GTO project and the Noisy Cube mission. And you can see in the initiative beside me, up top, there are the student proposed projects that share the facility where they would be managed and operated. And you can see a small orange rectangle in the figure, and that is the site where they could be monitored. Below this, there is the science and technology facility that is expanded, and the main elements are included. The students showed the GTO project on the left of the Venn diagram and the Noisy Cube mission on the right. The management team could be shared among both, and part of the scientific and technical members could work on both projects. So the two projects were proposed to have their own deliverables, but both followed the same requirement. And this was to make the data available to the general public. The GTO-DB was an exoplanet and technosignature database, whereas the Mission DB was the database of the Noisy Cube mission, and this provided the information about the Earth's technosignatures as seen from space. So the students presented an extremely comprehensive report of their proposed initiative, and this included information about the mission design and mission timeline, including the deliverables and the Gantt chart. They also included the proposed expenditure and budget, and these economic considerations included an engineering breakdown and a knowledge estimation. The students also detailed the technical challenges and the risk mitigation strategy. They ended by emphasizing the broader significance of the project. We now know how instrumental this work was to the field of SETI and the world as a whole, and the students really wanted to highlight this potential. So the students concluded their chapter on science and technology by reiterating their recommendations to the field of SETI and describing the relevance of these recommendations to their proposed initiative. So the first recommendation that they made was to have concurrent efforts in both biosignatures and technosignatures, but to have a greater focus on technosignatures. And this is why their projects focused on technosignatures. The second was to have a greater continuity of missions and experiments. And what this meant was really greater emphasis on the transfer of knowledge and educational opportunities. Both projects contained opportunities for graduate research. The group also recommended that they would have a greater emphasis on Earth applications, and this includes space debris and the Kessler effect. And these were actually a future application of the proposed CubeSat mission. Further recommendations is that there would be greater emphasis on multi-purpose missions or multi-organizational partnerships. And this was a large part of the initiative because the GTO project requires collaboration with the Space Telescope operators. And also the CubeSat mission requires piggyback launching. The final two recommendations were the most significant. The students first wanted to see a greater emphasis on data sharing from space telescopes and missions. And this was the core of their initiative because they really wanted to see open access data sharing. In addition, the students proposed increased participation with space-based projects and missions. And this was significant at the time because it meant bringing SETI from Earth-based telescopes to space-based telescopes and interplanetary missions. So I want to thank you for having me in this work. My favorite part of the project is looking back at all the discoveries in the archive footage. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. This is the ISU News at 6 o'clock. Latest breaking news reports show that scientists are well underway in cracking the code after first contact. I have with me scientific correspondent Joanne. Hello, hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes, I can hear you.
Brilliant, Joanne. We've been told that progress is being made in establishing contact with the aliens.
Yes. So we are trying to establish a baseline language to communicate with extraterrestrial intelligence.
And how is that going? Is there any success yet?
Yes, so when METI and SETI were first talked a few years ago, it was thought that there was some kind of universal language. And my colleague and I are actually working to try to adapt the lingua cosmica to send back messages.
Now you have to forgive me, I'm no physicist, but we've been told that the detection source is light years away. Now correct me if I'm wrong, but won't this cause a substantial time delay?
Yes, of course, and that's why there is another team working on quantum communication to make the contact as quick as possible.
I always knew there was life out there. I knew extraterrestrial intelligence must exist. I'm lucky to have been a part of the original team that worked on this, and to us it was never a matter of if we would find it, but when. You know, what's really interesting is Arthur C. Clarke did predict this. He wrote that we would make contact in 2030 and that we would meet extraterrestrial intelligence in 2100. And as you know, that second prediction is coming up, and we'll see whether or not that happens. I've been very blessed in that I got to achieve my childhood dream of going to space. Even with you know, all the world ships out there and the places of the universe that we have reached as humanity, I always knew I would come back to Earth. I'm so excited to hear you're doing this documentary, and it really takes me back, you know, 2020 when we were finishing up this project, and then there was a pandemic back then. You all know how that worked out. I am grateful that the 2020 pandemic really opened people's eyes, really changed the way that we treat the Earth. People used to think I was crazy. I was obsessed with quantum physics, and that obsession intensified during my time working on this project. Especially through SETI, the idea of quantum communication is important. The idea of consciousness and how it arises is so important. I would talk about quantum entanglement all the time, and my team was sick of it. But you know, who's crazy now? I think every day we're getting closer and closer to understanding how the universe works and the role of quantum entanglement in the universe. But until we do, every step along the way we're coming up with new technologies, and these quantum technologies are making the world a better place. I did my PhD in quantum communication, which was instrumental in allowing us to actually communicate with the exosapiens. We developed the instrumentation that has made it possible to communicate in real time. When we talk about communication, it's not just the technology behind it, but also the legal aspects, the protocols. My friend Juliana was working on this at the time. Her granddaughter is now in the field as well, along with my granddaughter. And I think it's amazing that the impact that such an inspiring field can have on so many generations.
Hello, I'm here live from our spaceship on a trip to meet for the first time exosapiens. It is an incredible honor to be part of this documentary and to talk to you about the work of my grandmother Giuliana Rotola and their team at the International Space University that in 2020 created the basis for what later became the United Nations Office for the Relations with Exosapiens, the institute that today I am directing. During the days at the International Space University, they were working on two main legal, political, and ethical objectives. The creation of a comprehensive legal framework to be ready in the case of a detection of a signal was the first primary goal. The second aim was to be sure that humanity was ready to interact with the extraterrestrial intelligence. Of course, they weren't ready. Can you just imagine humans 60 years ago? It was definitely not possible. But through their study, they were able to change the perspective of humanity in the following years. So let's go in order and see what they managed during those years at the university. Since there were no regulations related to the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, the first objective was the creation of a comprehensive legislative framework which could have been applied in case of a signal detection. In 1985, Alan Goodman proposed an idea of guidelines related to the search of artificial signals of extraterrestrial origin, raising the urgency to develop an international code of conduct in the case of the interception of extraterrestrial communication. The first of these four protocols established that researchers should have the freedom to communicate possible detection of signals, spacecraft, or habitats. It was later known as First Protocol and was the basis for the creation of the International Academy of Astronautics Post-Detection Principle in 1989. The principles were later updated by the Academy in 2010. And those principles were considering the search for extraterrestrial intelligence as part of space exploration activities. However, while this assumption was appropriate from an operative point of view, there were no example or regulations or cases in which SETI was treated as part of space exploration, and so bounded by the Outer Space Treaty. So the ISU team in 2020 decided to amend the protocols using a connection with scientific mission that they proposed. The first thing they did was analyzing the Outer Space Treaty articles that could support the inclusion of SETI in the definition of space exploration. The first article of the Outer Space Treaty states that the use and exploration of outer space should be free for everyone and encourages international cooperation in space. Then they consider Article 5. So the concept that an astronaut should be considered as an envoy for the whole humankind is bounded with the possibility of a space explorer finding extraterrestrial life forms. In such a situation, the finder should know how to act not only from an operative point of view, but also taking into consideration that what will be done on behalf of all the people on Earth. Finally, Article 11 established that each activity conducted in outer space has to be reported to the Secretary General of the United Nations, to the public, and to the international scientific community. So, through an analysis of the post-detection principle and the Outer Space Treaty, it was possible to update the first protocol, taking into consideration the means to communicate a possible detection to the public. The idea was to create an initial case with the Noisy Cube mission to later bind researchers, research institutes, countries, and international bodies to the post-detection principle and to the Outer Space Treaty. Launching a space exploration mission, as was proposed by the team in 2020, with the aim of researching extraterrestrial signature, provided a platform for SETI activities outside the Earth atmosphere. In such a scenario, it then became possible to consider the search for extraterrestrial intelligence as in line with the space exploration, and so bounded by the Outer Space Treaty. Their secondary objective was to understand if humanity was ready to have interaction with extraterrestrial form of intelligence. The problem was that creating a framework for a relationship where only one of the two factors is known was very complex. So they considered the relationship between human civilization and the environment and with the most comparable form of intelligence available on Earth, so animals. Doing so, they simulated a scenario wherein evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence was found, and they understood which behavior to avoid based on historical notions. They analyzed legal instruments and judicial decisions that show an evident conception of animals as insignificant, if not considered resources or property. This anthropocentric vision of the cosmos was preventing humanity from recognizing the fundamental needs of other forms of intelligence, different from the human one. Humanity at the time was still not able to perceive its belonging to an extremely independent biodiversity and was considered itself of such a superior rank as to almost not belong anymore to the animal category. For this reason, some species that were considered more intelligent, such as elephant, chimpanzee, or domestic animals, were gradually being more protected. But at the same time, their livelihood and their chances of survival were hampered by the lack of consideration of their belonging to an interdependent ecosystem. They also analyzed the legal status of the planet itself and nature in accordance with Ecuadorian and Bolivian law for Mother Earth, which represented the first two cases in which nature and Earth were considered legal entities with constitutional rights. Although those instruments were not internationally binding, they provided a strong vision and the basis for the perspective that human beings should take into a space exploration and the search for form of extraterrestrial intelligence. Giving, in fact, the difficulty in defining intelligence concretely and therefore making it impossible to define the type of form of intelligence that humanity might have contact in the future, this introspective ethical investigation was required to explore how civilization look at the universe and the different forms of intelligence that inhabit it. By taking example for these exemplary legal cases and society relationship with the planet and other non-human organisms that inhabit it, humanity could have then approached the treatment of the universe itself and other forms of extraterrestrial intelligence in a similar vein as the one proposed by the Bolivian law. So they understood that the search for extraterrestrial intelligence was nothing more than a mirror through which humanity could have been able to observe itself from another perspective. They understood it was necessary to move away from an anthropocentric vision of the world that at the time was characterizing society, and to recognize the value of each individual component of the cosmos. Then humanity could have been sufficiently prepared to face the discovery of new forms of intelligence in a constructive and non-destructive way. My grandmother was an inspiring woman, and together with her team, they made a future for us to live together. And now we are even able to see the stars. She used to read me her book when I was a child, a book about SETI and finding aliens. And it's crazy that today it became a reality.
The book, yes, that was a wonderful project. It was fun, but also stressful. We wanted to inspire the entire next generation. We knew the importance of outreach, of reaching the children, of presenting them with these concepts that are fun and creative, but at the same time based on real science, that they could present them with the ideas of exoplanets and extraterrestrial intelligence, going to the moon, going beyond. And we had an amazing artist, Eileen, who I worked with very closely on this book, and it was just so wonderful to see the success that it had, and not just in terms of the impact that it had on our team and on our own kids, but on scientists in the field and on the world, really.
Thank you for having me to talk about the work that my grandmother did on SETI outreach. Her work inspired me to go into this field, so it's an honor for me to be here today. As you all know, this was an important part of their project, and their outreach plan was developed to reach as many audiences as possible. So they had three main communication objectives. The first was to normalize the topic of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence to a variety of audiences. This would encourage more funding for research and prepare the general public for the possibility of making contact. The second was to disseminate the science behind SETI to the general public in order to change the SETI being a science fiction narrative that long dominated this field. And the third was to share the team's findings and proposals to be built upon by future researchers. As we all know, this is what happened. So the first thing they made was a public pilot survey to gauge the public perception of SETI. This survey ran from February 11th to March 11th, 2020, and it collected over 1,000 responses from over 30 countries. Their methodology was to generate questions related to the various aspects of their project, and the survey was distributed via the team's social network, which introduced a source of bias in the survey distribution. But regardless of the source of bias, 85% of participants actually had no space background, meaning no space-related education or industry experience. 84% of the responses indicated a belief in extraterrestrial life, whereas 69% believed in extraterrestrial intelligence. So again, this shows us the importance of the distinction between life and intelligence. Finally, 79% of participants believe that SETI has benefits for life on Earth. This was surprising at the time, given the perception of SETI back then. They did include other questions regarding the book, their legal and technical proposals, but these were the main results that were shared. The second thing they developed was their Area 21 merchandise. So the 21 students wanted to share science through some educational design. This quote here is from their website, which showed their mission to bring awareness to this fundamental question of, are we alone in the universe, and the science that we're using to explore it. So they offered a variety of merchandise on their website. As you can see, some examples here for adults and kids, and a variety of other items to maximize the audiences that they would reach. And they included merch related to their book as well. Here are some examples of the educational art, which was based on the real science and projects at the time. You can see here the Allen Telescope Array, the Hubble Space Telescope, and the Golden Record and Voyager. They were created also by the same artist as the book, so their signature style became well recognized with the success of the book. We also have some footage from the archive here featuring Simon, who handled the manufacturing and distribution of the merch.
Incredible. I mean, it was just a university team project, but the designs of these things were just so popular. My company manufactured just a few of these things to begin with, but they sold out almost immediately. They came to us originally because for the team, it was a more hands-off approach. I mean, we did everything. They did the designs, sure, and they were good designs. But once the customer got past their website, we handled the rest. Order processing, manufacturing, distribution. I suppose it's after the first month that the orders started coming in quicker than we could fill them. I mean, look, the designs were great, so we doubled down, upgraded the factory, and this made us a fortune. And then after first contact, the orders just kept going and going. I suppose they bought my first boat, if you think about it. You know, these generational ships they're talking about actually have the same designs on board each one. It's crazy, right?
So they also created a website that acted as a hub for all of this information. This was their main communication channel that included the recommendations along with their technical and legal proposals and the results of the pilot survey data. As you all know, these acted as building blocks which the team provided and informed many studies and breakthroughs to come. Even though we no longer use websites today, Xie here has been recreating the website for educational purposes, and he sent in a video from his world ship, which is currently out of comms range, explaining this new website.
I remember learning about the SETI project at school. The history of first contact is in very syllabus. I'm hoping to teach first contact to the children of this generation ship. We are heading to Proxima C, where we're hoping to meet the others in the next few decades. I'm a software specialist, and in my free time, I've been reconstructing the website. At first, it was a project for my students, but the Irene found my blog on it, and I've been working on it ever since. It's pretty basic, but I learned a lot about how they made this website, and I've tried to recreate it authentically as possible. This website was created to show the process of their research results. As we can see, there are several parts, including the homepage with an old-fashioned background image. There are also their research works, which including the scientific, the legal, and the outreach part. There is also their book and contact. I really want to see if I can reach them from our contact information. I have spent some time exploring their research. It is really interesting. So I think you should also check it out by yourself by accessing this link below. Check it out, guys.
Finally, this brings me to the kids' book that my grandmother wrote. This is my favorite by far. The book was based on the hero's journey concept, which many of our stories follow, where the protagonists meet a mentor after a call to adventure, and they learn some lessons along the way, returning enlightened from their adventure. So it aims to teach kids about scientific concepts related to SETI in a fun and creative way. Now we have a special book reading of Luna and Apollo's adventure from the MSS20 archives. Enjoy.
The book is called Luna and Apollo's Adventure. El libro se llama Las aventuras de Luna y Apolo.
One day, Luna and Apollo were playing along with their rocket and astronauts, singing their favorite moon song.
While carrying a big box, their mom walked in and told them of the adventure that was about to begin.
Ooh, look at the mommy. Eddie, look at the mommy here. And look at them play with the rockets. You see them play with the rockets and the astronauts? Yeah. I brought you a gift so you can see the moon, she said. Let's open it up and you can try it tonight before bed.
Luna and Apollo were super excited to see just what this gift could turn out to be.
They unwrapped the present and gasped in awe, filled with excitement by what they saw. This is a telescope, their mom explained. I use one at work too, but it's much bigger. We use it to study the universe and look for the planets and learn about stars by watching them glitter. Luna and Apollo were amazed by that fact. Can we please use it now? They asked. She said it's best to wait for the sun to go down, because then the moon will be around. Look, Felicia, this is a telescope.
Later that night, their mom said it was time. Yeah, it's so cool. It's the moon. And they set up a telescope and the moon was in line.
Using it to look at the moon and stars, they noticed something strange from afar. Looking closer, they saw the spaceship going into the moon. They knew they had to go to explore, and soon Luna and Apollo began jumping with joy as they set out to make a rocket, just like their toy.
Eddie, look at this rocket ship taking off. You see it?
Yeah!
Wow. And this is a picture called Earthrise. It's a very famous picture. You see Earth?
Was there in the picture?
It's like they're in a picture. They're on the moon.
Luna and Apollo were amazed to see that the alien could talk to them so easily. My name is Erin Tickles, but everyone calls me E.T. I'm meeting my friends below the surface. Would you like to come with me?
Feeling excited and put at ease, Luna and Apollo smiled happily. Nice to meet you, E.T., replied Luna. My name is Luna, and this is Apollo. We would love to meet your friends. Lead the way, and we will follow.
As they explored the underground caves, E.T. showed them a map and started to explain.
This map shows the exoplanets my friends are from. These are planets orbiting a star other than the Sun. They are all different, as you can see. Some yellow, some blue, some green.
Daddy?
Yeah?
These are not real kinds of planets.
Why? Because they don't look like the ones next to our sun?
Yeah, because I know, because yellow and pink planets don't exist, or green.
Right, because you know why? Because these planets are exoplanets. You know what exoplanets are? They're planets that orbit around different stars, not our sun, from really, really far away, light years away. But yeah, look, a red planet and a yellow planet.
¿Sabes lo que son los exoplanetas?
No.
Son planetas. ¿Viste que nosotros estamos girando alrededor del Sol? Los exoplanetas son planetas que están girando alrededor de otra estrella. Y están tan lejos que se ven chiquititos con algunos telescopios que están en el espacio. Es increíble, ¿no? But one thing they have in common, I guarantee. There's life on some of them, just like you and me. Even though we look as different as these planets, we are similar in many ways. It's all a balance.
The next day, Luna and Apollo woke up in their beds with thoughts of the universe in their heads. They ran downstairs excited to tell their mom about the crazy adventure that they had been on. They told her of the moon and their new friend E.T.
And all of the exoplanets they got to see. What an amazing story, she said. Did I read that to you before bed?
Luna and Apollo laughed. They knew it was hard to believe.
But they would always remember what they learned from their friend E.T.
Good night, Felicia.
What a beautiful, heartwarming video. Thanks to all the parents who took the time to record these videos with their kids back then. It really took me back to when my grandma would read this to me as a kid, and like the kids in the video, I was inspired and I learned too, and I hope that you were as well. Thank you again to the Institute for having me here and creating this documentary honoring my grandma and her amazing team. It means a lot to be a part of it, so thanks again.
Thank you very much, Saba. And thank you also, Ankita, for your introduction to the research back on 2020 related to the technology used for the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. And also thank you to my colleague, Dr. Erica Crowley, that tell us about the proposal that this group of students back in 2020 realized, and that after lead to a successful project on the finding of extraterrestrial signals. I would like to thank you also, Juliana, that teach us on the legal framework that this group of students developed at the International Space University, and on the ethical perspective that they studied and they try to implement. And after it became reality. So it is just crazy today to think about what was possible to do just with a student project. And again, Saba that showed us the outreach plan that this group of students had back in time. I would also like to thank you, our documentary director, Joan Bertrand, that put together these footage that you saw in this short amount of time. And these are from our archive at the Interstellar Anthropological Research Institute, and are from the past, while our colleagues were connected with us from all over the solar system, and we were with us today live. Finally, I would like also to thank you for your attention, and I hope that you enjoyed, and I really hope that you will produce our documentary for the 50th anniversary of the first detection of extraterrestrial signals next year. Now, I would like to come back to the reality. Everything that you saw related to a finding was fictional, of course, but could be probable in the future, we don't know. We are a group of students, 21 students at the International Space University, and we developed this project on the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Today, of course, is not the 14th of May 2080, but is the 14th of May 2020. And I would like also to thank other people that helped us during the last 7 months of project, and in particular our project supervisors, Virginia Voting and Bertrand Goldman, that helped us during this path, that give us some advice and guide us during the path that we did in the last months. And of course, thank you to the International Space University to allow us to stay together and to perform this project. It was amazing and we really enjoyed it, and we hope that you did the same. So now I'm opening the floor for any question or doubt that you may have. Thank you very much.
So, okay, thank you very much, Team SETI, for your presentation. I think this is very brilliant, and I want to congratulate you also for the hard work over months to put this together, and the very brilliant teamwork that you have also executed. So I followed through your presentation, and very clear. My question is on, we all agree that this search for extraterrestrial intelligence, the limitation currently is funding. So, like for example, Viking 1 and so many other missions, they cost a lot. And you may also wish to know that it was in 2016 that NASA started to digitize data from Viking 1. So my question is that, in your opinion, based on the research you have done, do you think the problem is that we need more data, or we need to process more those data we have from past missions? I allow you to answer that.
If no one else wants to take this, do you mind if I take this?
Yes, I was saying, go ahead, Fiona. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Well, actually, I disagree. The problem is we don't actually have enough information regarding exoplanets, since it's still a fairly recent thing. We basically primarily have TESS and we have Kepler. And while the data from that is being collected and sort of digitalized, we don't actually, like I said, we don't have enough, and technology is always improving. So I think the key thing will be characterizing data from future missions, and such as the James Webb Telescope, and we're going to need that data. But I think past data, while it is helpful, it's probably not helpful enough, given that the instruments wouldn't have been fine-tuned enough.
Okay, thank you. So I allow Juan to take his question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Taiwo. I have enjoyed the multimedia presentation. Really, congratulations. I have understood one of your main recommendations is that humanity should have open access, and all projects should promote data sharing to everyone. Is this not happening already with the data from science missions being available to the whole scientific community?
So I'll start on this a little bit, but maybe Fiona will want to add to it. So there is some element of data sharing, and everybody shares the results for sure. But when we're saying open access data sharing, we're talking more about the raw data. And so where that comes into our initiative is we want to use the raw data from the space telescopes for a different purpose. And so that happens a little bit already, especially for SETI, but we would like to see it happen more.
Yeah, just to add on to that, basically everything that Erica said, but like she's talking about with the raw data, again, we're primarily looking at exoplanets, and we're looking at characterizing those exoplanets. Things like technosignatures and SETI is very much in the background. So part of our proposal is basically trying to make a kind of a catch-all database with this technosignature element, which hasn't really been explored until now. And that is something that's only really available with access to that raw data. And it requires a lot of communication between institutions around the world and space agencies so we can get access to that data.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies very much indeed. I would like to give now the floor to Dr. Virginia Votring, who is the granddaughter of the world famous researcher with the same name, Virginia Votring, who, as you all know, back in 2025, obtained the Nobel Prize together with Professor Bertrand Goldman for their joint research on pharmacology for exosapiens. So the word is now with Virginia Votring III.
Thank you very much, Juan. Good job, SETI team. I'd like to ask you to tell me a little bit more about the scientific and technological spin-offs that have come from the SETI research that has been done in the past couple of decades.
Thank you, Virginia, for this question. I will pass the floor to Erica, that maybe can handle this.
I'm actually going to turn it over to Fiona because it looks like she has already unmuted her mic and it looks like she has something she wanted to share.
Yeah, this is primarily what filled up our literature review. SETI has actually, I know a lot of people seem to think of SETI as almost like pseudoscience, but we're kind of forgetting that they've contributed massively to science in general. Particularly, there's this idea of citizen computing, citizen science, and SETI has been a huge front runner for that. SETI at Home, which you might have all heard of, has actually sadly recently shut down as of March, but their core software, BOINC, which is a great name, is still available and it's used in a lot of distributed computing. So what this essentially does is it simulates a supercomputer, and that's basically all SETI. That came from Berkeley. So in terms of spin-offs in the past, we have that. I believe Avner, who I don't think is in this call at the moment, but he was researching sort of other spin-offs, including something called Li-Fi, which again is about these optical communication methods and how we could use that instead of communication as a way of delivering things like Wi-Fi and connectivity. So there's absolutely a ton of spin-offs, and that's kind of the focus that we were trying to bring, is that SETI is not, you know, a science that's for kooky sort of, yeah, it's not a pseudoscience. It is real and its technologies are applicable.
Thank you for that answer. I guess I wish that you had emphasized those things a little bit more in your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Virginia, for this comment. Yes, unfortunately, we try to create a sort of storytelling related to our project, so we didn't include everything. But yes, thank you for for the comment.
I will turn things over to my colleague, Professor Zervos.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, my dear colleague Virginia, and thank you for the team for the presentation. I enjoyed it. I thought at times perhaps it was a little bit superimposed on the content, the storytelling, but I enjoyed it, especially the last part where the younger generations took the center stage. I have one question because I've been made conscious of time, and that relates to a practical, let's say, aspect. Of course, money is very important. It makes Earth go round, not necessarily the world, depending on whether we find extraterrestrial intelligence. But say that we had, let's say, $100 million. Does your work indicate the priorities on which this should be spent for SETI, for the search for extraterrestrial? Where should this fund, in terms of priorities, be initially, or in terms of, let's say, climax, directed at? Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe Erika can answer this question.
For sure. So one of the recommendations that we made was to have concurrent efforts in astrobiology and in technosignatures. A really great paper that we found did an analysis of where the money allocation should go in terms of public funding. And what they found in that paper was that there should be public funding towards astrobiology and biosignatures because it has the best chance of finding primitive life. But there should also be funding towards SETI and towards technosignatures because it can find a better indicator of intelligent life. So in this paper, they acknowledge that, you know, more funding should go to biosignatures, but money should still go to technosignatures. And I forget the amount that they actually indicated. It wasn't, I think it was 1 billion. Do you recall, Ankita?
No, unfortunately, I do not recall.
That's okay. But they indicated that a small amount should go to SETI. In terms of the project that we've proposed a low-cost option because the technosignature observatory project is data sharing. And so really it wouldn't need its own telescopes. So that kind of thing would be low cost. The same thing with the CubeSat mission. It's also a low cost mission in comparison to the full large telescopes. So I think in terms of where money should go in terms of technology and science, I think right now these low cost missions are a good start.
If I may add to that, like we presented in this presentation, there was this axis of merit, which sort of characterized what searches should be prioritized over others and what are the factors we need to take into account. And that had considered things like how important a technosignature is, how visible it is to our present technology. So I think we need to take that into account as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much for that. So I'm going to pass the floor over to Professor Hild.
Thank you, Professor Zervas, and great congratulations to TP SETI on this very memorable presentation. And as Professor Zervas mentioned, one of the highlights of this presentation was the very, very clever video footage of our distinguished students reading to their children. This was truly memorable. I've just one question as we have limited time. What do you consider to be the 3 most useful techno-signatures in our quest for the search for extraterrestrial intelligence?
Thank you, Professor Hill. I guess that I can pass the floor again to Erika that can answer this.
Well, for sure. So traditionally, it's been radio and more recently optical technosignatures. But the technosignatures that we're really emphasizing in our initiative are more artificial objects. So, you know, satellites orbiting exoplanets. And we think that there's a lot of validity in studying and going beyond the traditional to look at next generation technosignatures. And Inkita went through different options for next generation, but we decided to focus on the artificial objects that transition exoplanets. So the 3 would be radio, optical, and artificial objects.
Thank you very much, Erika, for that. May I pass the floor to my next colleague? Thank you.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much for this entertaining presentation. Beautiful kids indeed. I would have a couple of questions on your 2 scientific proposals. So I must say that at first I was a bit skeptical about your project for GTO. But actually I remember that a few years ago, a couple of billionaires have founded a new institute called the Flatiron Institute. With the goal of improving science output using computers, putting together software engineers and scientists, which is exactly what you've proposed to do. So that's great, actually. At the same time, those people put on the table 80 million for the first year of operation. Okay, it's in the center of New York, so maybe the rent is more important. But you propose basically every year a few $100,000 dollars, whatever. So I wonder if you did not a bit overestimate the productivity of an astronomer or even a software engineer. Do you think that this amount of money that you propose is sufficient to make a difference?
So I can speak to that a little bit. We did do the breakdown with various cost estimations, and we incorporated the costs of staff and different facilities. And so I do think that we have been pretty comprehensive with our estimates, perhaps lower than other estimates, but I think that our estimates are appropriate based on our breakdown.
If I could add to that, a lot of our project design, especially for the GTO, was based off of a collaboration between educational institutes. So bearing in mind now that a lot of PhD students, especially in the field of astrophysics and astrobiology, they have a large software element as part of their projects, and this is the perfect thing that they can work on because database design is now is a lot of PhDs. So we're sort of cutting costs by introducing the PhD student element and postgrad element.
For sure. And I think also the fact that both projects are being brought into one initiative helps reduce costs as well, because you can share personnel.
All right. And then I would have a question about the Noisy Cube mission. So I did not quite understand. I mean, this mission will be flown with a more important mission to Mars. When will it separate, and how much independent it is from the main satellite?
So I guess that will be me. So our sort of idea was that it would be sort of piggybacking on the launch of a mission probably within the next 10 years, because we're sort of approaching that synodic period to Mars. And it would detach, I'm not exactly sure, I can't remember exactly where, but it would sort of detach at any point, and it's basically not really part of the parent payload at all. It just detaches and looks back. I don't actually remember if we have it detaching once it reaches Mars or if we have it detaching halfway through, but if anyone can remember, please chime in.
I think that's fine. I would have another question on this. So I understand the motivation to piggyback on a mission to Mars, because there will be a few in the coming years. What about piggybacking on mission, if there were one, towards Venus, for instance, or yeah?
It's an option for sure. We chose Mars primarily because, like I said, because of synodic period, but it absolutely is an option. A couple of the other things that we considered included missions that might have gone past Jupiter, but Mars just seemed like the best candidate given the frequency and the amount of missions that will be coming up.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah,
and a final, sorry.
Part of the reason why we went for the CubeSat was because of the versatility. So, I mean, we designed it for Mars, but with the idea that it was a versatile CubeSat and it could be incorporated on other missions as well.
Yeah.
All right, and my last technical question would be, you have a discussion about spectroscopy versus or together with hyperspectral imaging. Given the distance to which Earth would be observed, 100 million kilometers, the resolution of those cameras, what difference do you make between spectroscopy and hyperspectral imaging?
So primarily the idea with the spectroscopy is that we might actually be able to image sort of frequency bands and absorption spectra, just to see, for example, if the number of satellites around Earth actually kind of adds a noisy effect to that. That's the primary reason we wanted the spectroscope specifically, as opposed to the hyperspectral camera. The camera, we're hoping to get optical and infrared data off of primarily, but we're pretty aware that, you know, the technology of these things are not, I don't want to say they're not great at the moment, but whether or not they'll hold up to 100 million kilometers. So that's why we're trying to sort of build redundancy into the payloads, but trying to make sure that they reinforce one another. But I mean, the whole point of this is it's supposed to be a starting point, and hopefully we find something, and this will generate more funding for more missions like this in the future.
All right, thank you very much. I pass on the floor to Professor Gongling.
Gongling has had to drop off the call, so it's Danny next.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. And I would like to congratulate to Team SETI for this very attractive and creative presentation. But also I want to tell you that my son, he was with me because he wanted to watch your presentation, because he heard something, you know, interesting as a noise. And he came and he really believed that you are really coming from future and you're based somewhere in space. So at the point when you presented the outreach video with your classmates and with your also other members from other team, what I really like as idea, this kind of inter-ISU, inter-teams collaboration. So he asked me if he can have on his tablet same apps, which was used by parents and kids, and where he can download it, if exists. This is his question. So my question, I will ask at the same time, it's actually going to the religions. And if one day extraterrestrial intelligence will be detected, do you think that new religions will be born? And what will be impact on existing one?
Thank you, Daniela, for first of all for this story about your son reaction, and for sure there would be a possibility to download our book story from the website that we are now opening. It will be open after the release of the final report of the team project. And to answer your question, I would like to ask Ezekiel if he can take it.
Oh, sorry. My background is not okay. Let me check this. So I will cut the video. That's okay. Thank you, Daniela, for your question. We did a research in regards to this topic, and the main conclusion is that the institutions might suffer a little bit, but not the believers. That is the main conclusion. Of course, they will change regarding Oriental or Western religions, so because they are in some way different, but the short answer is that the institution might suffer or might impact it than the believers themselves.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to applications, and thank you very much for the religion aspect. So now I'm not sure if Professor Walter Peters is connected. So that will, then I would like to pass floor to him. If not, Professor Chris Welch, he can take over after me for the questions.
Okay, thank you, Daniela. No, Professor Peters is not online today, so I'll take the last set of questions. So thank you for a very innovative presentation format. It must have taken a lot of preparation, that's for sure. And the fact that some people thought you were already on a spaceship, that must be an additional win. I've got a couple of questions of my own, but also since we still have, I've got about another 7 minutes left. I have a question that's been asked by Steve Brody, who's a senior advisor to ISU in North America and faculty member. So Steve says, are some of the TP SETI team planning to work together in the near future, perhaps within the ISU Space Payloads Lab and perhaps as part of a ChipSat department in this lab to implement prototypes for a noisy CubeSat?
Thank you, Chris, for these questions from North America. And I may pass the floor to Erica, I guess.
I mean, so we haven't made plans to continue the work on the Noisy Cube mission, but I could see that happening. I could see us continuing to work on this in the future. We are a very tight group, especially the science and technology team. So I can see future collaboration for sure. Maybe Fiona has something to add.
Yeah, actually we're back sort of about halfway through the TPs. We did actually end up sort of chatting sort of informally with Chipsats about this, because part of our research, our initial idea was to try and send something out sort of interstellar, to try and send this payload but further out, and we just couldn't fit it onto a Chipsat basically. So it was definitely something that we considered, and we would consider if anyone wanted to pick this work up in the future. But I think I speak on behalf of all of the science team that we'd love to pursue this further. It was really fun. So.
Okay, we'll have to see if we can find ways to carry it forward then. But it's for a discussion, afterwards.
Sure, that would.
So a general question then. You had this kind of narrative structure to the presentation, and most narratives have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Once upon a time, story, and then kind of the conclusion. And I'll be honest, one of the things I missed was a kind of conclusion. Did they all live happily ever after? And what were their three main recommendations and conclusions? So that's the question. What are your three main recommendations and your three main conclusions?
So maybe I can take this one. And for the general overview on our team project, we thought that there is this necessity to have this sort of combination of actions in different fields. And I can definitely say that the first conclusion could be, the first recommendation could be to develop new ways of research for extraterrestrial signals. We proposed one, this interaction between data from space telescopes and noisy cube mission. And so, but it's important to keep research on this field, because right now the majority of research is done in radio wavelength, and we think that it's time to go farther on that. The second one is that we understood that if we found a positive, if we have a positive detection, if we will have a positive detection one day, there is no a real international regulation on that. So there are many questions that are without an answer, like who should handle the detection information to the public, who should deliver it, which are the international institutions that should be involved. So the second recommendation could be to pursue these sort of binding actions to the Outer Space Treaty that we proposed. And that could be done in a couple of ways. The first one could be to amend the Outer Space Treaty, that it's very not feasible right now. And the second one could be to create a sort of precedent to create a binding actions related to the IAA post-detection principles. And the third one is that we need more awareness around the public, because right now SETI, as we said, it's not really understood as a science. There are a lot of gray areas around this topic. So we definitely need an outreach campaign on this that some institutions around the world already do, but maybe a joint effort, global effort could be a step forward on this field. So I guess that these are our three main recommendations.
Okay, thank you very much for that. That brings us, I think, a little bit early, but you know, it's been a long day, to the end of the Q&A. So hopefully in a second the video will come back on, and I need my video enabled. Okay, I think I'm on. So I would like to say congratulations to both teams for their very hard work in producing two engaging and informative presentations under really quite demanding circumstances. So it just goes to show what can be done with will. We hope that out there on the internet, all of the audience watching this afternoon enjoyed the presentations. And we hope that you will join ISU in the future for other presentations, both on the MSS and from other programs that we run. If you want to do that and you don't already, please follow us on social media. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Now, on behalf of the students and staff and the faculty of ISU, I thank you all for watching. And we'll say goodbye to the students in particular. Normally at this point you would have a big party. Obviously that's going to be rather difficult under current circumstances, but I hope you find some way to collectively yet safely celebrate your achievements. And to everybody, see you on the next orbit. Take care.